We're going to start talking about here tonight. How do we actually break free from a porn addiction, even if you do not personally have one? So, first of all, I gotta prove to you though, biblically, since I didn't talk about it last week, I've got to prove to you this week why porn use is a sin. Hold up. There we go. All right, so we're going to talk about I know it. I got to be able to prove to you guys from the Bible, just 2 points. It's very easy for me to do why it's a sin. Because I told you last time why it's bad and destructive and you shouldn't do it. But now I'm going to tell you why it's a sin. And there's 2 reasons. Very easy. Number 1, it is addictive. You're like, what? Is addiction a sin in the Bible? Yes, it is. All right? So in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 12, here's what it says about addiction. It says, all things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient, meaning beneficial. Oh, hold on. I got to do like that teacher thing. You're like, lick your fingers and turn the page. No, there's a thing of pins going around. I don't have any. Okay, listen. All things are lawful to me, but not all things are expedient. All things are lawful, but I will not be brought under the power of any. Meats for the belly and belly for the meats, but God shall destroy both it and them. Now the body is not for fornication, which means sexual immorality. It says, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. So the principle here is this. Did y'all know? It is a sin for anything in your life to become an addiction. I'm not just talking about drug use. I know that's the easiest one, or alcohol use, right? Anything that becomes an addiction for you, something that you find it hard just to say no to. Did y'all know that is actually sinful? Because you are allowing this thing, who is not God, to have control over your life. And when I say addiction, let me clarify. I'm not saying doing something that you enjoy. So if you enjoy playing video games, like playing an hour or 2 a day, I don't think that's an addiction. I would consider addiction something a little more serious, like something like if somebody said, okay, hey, can you go a week without? You're like, oh yeah, that's easy. If you can't legitimately go a week without something without having some sort of mental breakdown and like convulsions about it, you have an addiction. And there may be a lot more things than you realize that you're addicted to in your life. The phone, social media would definitely be one. Every year at camp, I got to deal. Y'all sound like a bunch of addicts every time I tell y'all. No. We're not. This is not an open conversation where I get to hear your points. I'm just making a statement. Every year, y'all try to give me new and improved arguments from the last year of why you need your phone. Tyler, and you get me all the reasons, and every time, y'all sound like a bunch of addicts to me. You can go 1 week, and it's not even a full week, it's 5 days. 5 days without constantly checking the beeping and the buzzing and the dinging from your phone. But some of you guys are so dependent upon those dopamine hits that it's hard. So yes, any form of addiction is sinful. Right? So it says, I will not be brought under the power of anything. You should have control over your life as a Christian. You should be able to say no to things. Even if those things themselves are not bad, having the addiction to it is bad. But let me give you, this is the death shot. This is what makes it, if you're like Tyler, but what if somebody like was watching porn but they weren't addicted? Then is it still sinful? Okay, in case you think that's even possible, here's the kill shot. Reason number 2 why porn is a sin. It is based on lust. There is no way to get around this one. He's like, Tyler, what's lust? Oh, I'm glad you asked. All right, so Matthew chapter 5, verse 27 through 30, Jesus tells us what lust is. He describes it in very nice detail for us. He says, you have heard that it was said by the old prophets, you shall not commit adultery, right? Don't cheat on your spouse, right? Everybody knows that. You shouldn't. Well, some people apparently don't. But Jesus says, this is one of the basic commands, right? Don't cheat on your spouse. He says, but I tell you, I'm going to go 1 step further, but I tell you, whosoever looks at a woman to lust after her has already committed adultery in his heart. And if thy right eye offend you, pluck it out and cast it from you, for it is better that one of your members should perish, meaning being thrown into hell, than that the whole body should be cast into hell. And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee. For it is profitable, it is better that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. Now let me clarify. Jesus is not speaking literally when he says, if you struggle with lust, you need to cut your eye out and cut your arm off. He's using a thing called exaggeration to make a point, right? You ever heard somebody use an exaggeration, right? So the idea is not literally, oh, if my eyes are causing me to sin, then if I pluck them out, that's how I get to heaven, right? Because we know heaven is not based upon works, it's based upon your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. But Jesus is making the point that this kind of sin is deadly serious. Lust, see, this is this problem. In our culture, one, people don't even understand what lust is. And we're going to get into that in this series. We're going to talk about what the definition of lust is. How do you tell lust from like attraction? Like, what's the difference between those two things? But going beyond that, most people think, as long as I'm not cheating, then I can pretty much do whatever I want sexually. As long as it's consensual. That's basically the spirit of our day. As long as what you're doing is consensual, then it's okay. You want to be in you want to have 3 people in one. You want to be same sex. You want to, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to think about, whatever you want to watch, as long as it's consensual. That's the idea in our culture. Can I tell you, the Bible has standards. You ought to have standards for yourself in your own behavior. And one of those standards is, even if you're not committing the act, but fantasizing about it up here, God says at a heart level you're already guilty of the act. Because the only thing you lack is an opportunity to do it. It's kind of like the question, if you could steal $1 million from the bank and nobody would know, would you do it? If you answer yes, can I tell you, you're already a thief. You just haven't had the opportunity to commit the act yet. This is what Jesus is getting at here. Lust is of the heart. There's no way to watch porn without lusting after what you're seeing on the screen. That is the purpose of porn, is to get you to lust after the people on the screen. So yes, porn use is absolutely, totally, 110% a sin. There is no defense without the Bible, and there is no defense with the Bible. Okay, so now that we're all caught up and on the same page, how do we fix the problem? How do we fix the problem? Some of you guys in here, you got the problem. And you're like, Tyler, I'm not saying like I know. I'm saying statistically, probably people in here do. I'm going to go up here exposing people. All right, let me name off names. No, I would never do that. If I did that, I wouldn't have anybody left in my youth group because everybody would be exposed, including myself, all right? So we don't name names. We deal with the problem, all right? Anyway, because seriously, are we really going to admit, if everybody sit here and I said, all right, Kaylee, over. Wrong person. Name off every sin you've committed in the last week and go down one by one. All right? It'd be very uncomfortable. We would all be very uncomfortable by the end of the night. All right? That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. So here's what I want to try to demonstrate to you guys. I told y'all listen. Listen. The title of tonight's lesson is lie number 1. There's a lie that I think our culture believes that is the root cause of porn addiction. And it is this lie that I think keeps people trapped in the use of porn or lust, even if they're not watching something, but they're thinking about something. It is this lie that I think is the starting point for that problem. Because here's the reality of it. What you believe has a huge impact on how you behave. Did you guys know that? If you do not believe that there is any consequence to your actions when you die, it's going to change how you behave. That's why Christians behave differently than atheists, as an example. If you believe that when you die in an act of terrorism, God's going to give you 72 virgins, like they believe in the radical version of Islam, it's going to change how you behave. Will it not? Okay, so I want to give us some more examples of this. We've talked about the abortion issue before. And one of the challenges, if you've ever talked to somebody who supports abortion and you as a Christian oppose it because you're like, man, you're murdering a baby, right? If you've ever told somebody who supports abortion, hey, that you shouldn't support it because how can you believe in murdering a baby? You know what they would probably tell you is, I don't believe it's a real human baby yet. That's why they're okay with the idea of abortion as long as they believe it's not really fully human yet. Well, that's a whole nother problem. But I'm saying, before somebody can believe that they're committing murder, y'all listen, they first have to believe the thing being killed is actually a human. And if you don't believe this thing inside the body is a human, then you're not going to think it's murder, will you? You might now support abortion because you're like, well, what's wrong with it if it's just a clump of cells? Which, by the way, I have a hat that I got from our D.C. trip recently, and the hat says clump of cells, and it points down to me. Y'all get the idea? Okay, we're all clumps of cells. That's not a good argument. But point is, if somebody believes a lie, it's going to change how they behave. And it's not until they have that lie corrected in their mind, and they now believe the truth, that they're going to have a change of behavior. Okay? So I actually brought something to demonstrate this idea, and it's going to be pretty fun. I asked earlier, for those who are here, if you've never done Oculus before, never done VR, virtual reality before. And Nevaeh, was it you that said you've never done it before? Yeah, you, Nevaeh, that's your name, right? Have you ever done virtual reality before? No. Has anybody else never done it before? I'm trying to get Micah, you're lying so hard. Is he telling the truth?
I'm telling the truth.
You've never played it before? Have you ever played this before, like virtual reality? Okay. I feel like Nevaeh really does not want to go, but Eric, I feel like you'd be willing to do it.
I want to go.
Okay, come up here. Come up here. Okay, so I want to demonstrate to y'all something, and give me just a second. I'm going to get this set up so we can all watch you up here. All right, let me let me pull this over real quick. All right. Just don't fall. Don't fall. Eric, please don't fall. Eric.
I'm gonna leave.
Okay, you're good. All right.
Ooh, donuts.
Is it still hold on.
It says donuts. Okay.
Hey, go ahead and jump off though. Just walk straight over. Boom, he's dead. He's completely and totally dead. Alright, now I gotta ask you a question. In your gut, did you feel that it's like a roller coaster? Did you feel it come up in your gut? Okay. Now the point of that, and for those who want to play it later, I wish y'all could have seen it. If you've never played it before, it's a rush. It is a rush. It feels real. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing about virtual reality. All right, the reason people react that way. Yeah, you got.
Can I do it again after class?
Yes, after class, we're gonna do it again. Okay, need y'all focus. Okay. The reason people react that way is because your brain is literally tricked into thinking that what's in front of you is real. Because you move your head around and it follows you, your brain's like, yeah, that my environment's 100% legit. And it really does feel like you're on top of a building. I actually played this before with some friends, and let's just say she fell face forward and started screaming. And it was like, I thought she destroyed my headset. She had fell so bad, all right? So look, but the point is, this only works if your brain truly buys into it, right? If you're just playing on a flat screen and you're watching something and there's somebody falls, you don't really feel anything, right? But it's different when you're in virtual reality because now you really do believe it's real. That belief, your brain's reaction to it changes how you behave.
Is there zombie games on it?
There's all kinds of games on there, right? But wait, listen, I don't have time to talk about Oculus because I got to move on with my lesson, all right? But y'all get the idea. What you believe affects how you behave, okay? So let me move on just a little bit here. So here's what we got to do. So I got a verse. So this is the fill in the blank. So y'all pay attention to it. Pay attention to us. Everybody make sure you put your phones away too. No distractions. We don't want any of that. Here's the verse. It's John chapter 8, starting in verse 31. All you got to do is just fill in the underlined parts here. But I'm going to go ahead and read the full passage for us. All right, so John chapter 8, verse 31 to 36. And here's what Jesus says about understanding and knowing the truth. It says, Then Jesus said to those Jews which believed in him, he said, If you continue in my word, then you are my disciples indeed. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And then he goes on to say in verse 34, he says, Truly, truly, I say unto you, whoever commits sin is the servant of sin. And the servant abideth not in the house forever, but the Son, meaning me, I abide forever. So if the Son therefore shall make you free, you shall be free indeed. So Jesus is telling us here, the key to freedom is what? Truth. The truth shall make you free. So If the lie is what's key, if believing a lie keeps you trapped, then understanding the truth is what makes you free. Gives you freedom from being entrapped. Because you're like, Tyler, okay, you've got a long intro. What's the first lie? My notes, I got the blank. I'm waiting for you to tell me. Okay, here's the first lie. Y'all ready?
Yes.
The first lie is this. The human body is a sexual object.
Who says?
The human body is a sexual object. Who says it? It's how do people behave. You may say, Tyler, I've never heard anybody say that. Okay, but can I ask you a very simple question? Do people treat their bodies as sexual objects?
Yes.
Yes. The vast majority of people treat their and others' bodies, now listen, as sexual objects. Now you may think, Tyler, well how? In what way do people do this? And in what way are people, acting in this way? Right? And so in case you don't know, the word object is where we get the term objectification. You ever heard that?
Yes.
The woman says, hey, I keep being objectified by other men. What does she mean by that? They're looking at me like a piece. Hey, Braden, and y'all stop. Focus. Means they're looking at me like an object, right? Like I'm not a human being. I'm just a flesh shell meant for them, right? And in the same way, there are women who objectify men. You may say, Tyler, not me. Okay, but there are women who do that. And I promise you, why do you think there are so many female-oriented TV shows where there's all these situations where the man always ends up taking his shirt off in some way, somehow, to reveal all that muscle underneath? Women do it too. Now, I'm not saying men and women do it all the time, and every single man and every single woman does it 24/7. But the objectification of people treating other people and their bodies as a sexual object is the norm in our culture. That is why people dress the way that they dress. They act the way that they act. They watch the things that they watch. Because whether or not they say this, they believe this. If I was to ask you, okay, right, you learned probably, was it 6th, 7th grade is where some of you guys probably started your sex education class. Maybe some of you have already finished with it, whatever.
I never had that.
Somewhere in there, huh? What?
Furnace is too small. We never have one.
What do you mean? Palmer had one.
You don't have it no more. You can't have it no more.
Dang, so that basically means whatever y'all know, it's either from your parents, me, or your friends. That's scary.
Yeah, our school's not.
Okay, anyway, wait, hold on. I didn't mean to open that can of worms. Y'all focus. Okay, so maybe some of you guys have never had a sex education class. Okay, point is, you learn that, hey, those parts on your body have a use. They're not just there, right? They have a practical function. Part of the function is sex. But is it just for sex? No. But the way our culture acts and treats people's bodies, it's like the only thing our bodies are meant for is sex. The only thing they're meant for is to capture the attention of other people. So people dress a certain way, they act a certain way, they watch certain things because they treat their own bodies in this way. Now this lie, I think, is not just believed by people who are not Christian. I think it is believed by a lot of well-meaning Christians too. We're going to see, but let's start with, I call this two sides of the same coin. So that little weird icon there, I made that, by the way. It's like a little snake head and the snake tail. So we're going to show how this lie would affect people who don't believe, who are not Christians. They're lost, they're just secular, whatever. How might they react if they believe this? And then we're going to see, on the other side of that coin, how this lie would affect a Christian's behavior if they believe it. So the first half of that, let's talk about the world for a second. How might they react? If they believe the human body is a sexual object, well, how are they going to act? Number one, the body is going to be seen as sexual and fun. You know what? Yeah, the body is a sexual object. That's awesome. Let's do whatever we want with it. That's great, man. Who doesn't love sex, right? Let's go out and do whatever we want. Number two, so then people are going to use their bodies for sinful pleasure and even profit. OnlyFans, pornography, y'all realize that stuff lives off of money. People don't do that for free.
What if you sell your feet?
But then you're sexualizing your feet then. You're objectifying your own body.
I don't know.
If you sell pictures of your feet, you know why you're selling it. You know the audience that's in there for that, all right? That's what I'm saying. So people are going to use, listen. So if you're in the world, you're not a Christian, and you see the body as a sexual object, you're just going to use your body for sinful pleasure. Do whatever you want with it, and then you're going to make money off of it too, because why not? Why not go make money off of it? I'm already enjoying it. Might as well make money while I'm enjoying it too. Then the last thing, this perverted sexuality is going to lead many people to be abused. And we talked about this last time. We talked about the porn industry, how all the sex trafficking that goes on, how that if there was no more pornographic websites, the sex trafficking industry would almost die overnight, pretty much. Because most sex trafficking is not done physically anymore, it's digitally. So, this is the consequence for non-Christians for believing this lie. And we see this all the time, by the way. None of these things here are factually incorrect. Y'all know this to be true. This is how our culture treats the body. Because you know that's how they think of it. You know that's how they act. But how would a Christian respond if they also think of the body in this way? It's going to be different, of course. But does everybody have their blanks filled in? Everybody? Because every time I go to the next slide and you aren't ready, like, no, go back. And then I'm like, dang, calm down. All right? So here's how it would affect somebody who's in the church, a Christian, a believer. You're going to see the body. The body is going to be seen as sexual and shameful. Ooh, it's the other side of that coin. So instead of seeing the body as like, oh, an exciting thing, now it's like, oh, it's something wrong. It's sinful. It's gross. It's shameful, right? Number two is people then are going to cover their bodies for fear of sin and temptation. So sometimes you guys tell me and Shay how over the top some of these dress codes can be when we have youth activities and stuff like that. And I think when we go to camp and other places where we can't control those dress codes, sometimes the motivation might be fear of the body as being a source of sin and temptation. And number three, the last consequence will be feelings of attraction or lust are going to cause many people, Christians, to feel trapped. So the Christian version of believing this lie leads to a different outcome. See, because as Christians, we do believe there is a such thing as sin. We do believe that we have to be pure in our sexual lives. But if you think of the human body as a sexual object, you're going to have an overreaction. See, instead of merely avoiding the sins that the Bible lists out, you're going to go above and beyond that because you now see the human body, oh, that's something shameful, right? I've made jokes about it before, like, oh, hey, you better cover up that shoulder. You're going to cause somebody to lust, right? Hey, you better not wear those sandals. Somebody's going to lust, right? You cover up every part of your body. In some cultures, listen, y'all think Christian culture in America, listen, if y'all think Christian culture in America is too restrictive on how people dress, you should try visiting the Middle East sometime, where women are wearing head to toe, not a single skin cell is shown.
Their eyes.
Even sometimes then, they got a veil over, depending on how extreme of the area that they're in. So this fear of the body comes from believing the body is a sexual object, right? So, meaning we have a problem where both the world and the church is viewing the body the same way, but it's resulting in two totally different behaviors. But let's be honest, is this behavior really going to help you break free of a porn addiction? If you're just afraid? No. Okay, can I ask you a question? How are you ever going to get to a place where you're never going to see anybody's skin ever again? Every time you go to the beach, every time you go in public, every time you go on social media, how are you going to ever avoid seeing another human body? Even if it's not fully naked, how are you going to avoid it? In this day and age, in this culture, you can't. So if this is your only response, everybody's just got to cover up, and I've got to... Guys, you're not going to make it. You're not going to make it as long as you believe this lie. As long as you believe and treat the human body as a sexual object, you've already lost the battle before it's even started. Because you believe something that's not true. Because the human body is not a sexual object. Y'all hear me? The human body is not a sexual object. You're like, Tyler, you're going to have to prove that to me. You're going to have to show me how it's not, all right?
Ain't nobody talk like that.
Exactly. I'm talking like that so that nobody tries to agree with it. I'm making fun of people who think that way. That's the whole point. So let's talk about the truth here. Let's talk about the truth. Hey, y'all listen. Let's talk about the truth. We're done when we're done. Here is the truth. The body is a beautiful creation of God that bears His image. The body is a beautiful creation of God that bears His image. Did I spell beautiful? No, you spelled beautiful. I'm like, listen. I spell checked
She
it.
said B-E-U-A.
B U. All right. Anyway. Okay.
You are so
To prove this, hey y'all, listen. To prove this to you guys, from the Bible, I have a verse. I always got a verse. Genesis chapter 1. Just fill in the blanks here. I'm going to read a little bit more. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Here's what it says about God creating. And no, hey, shh.
Yeah, this
On
is
here,
John.
on here it said John 8:31.
20 to 36.
Yeah, it's
Baby, you
it's
got this
basically the
all
same
wrong.
one as the other one.
I messed up on the
But the
notes.
words are
Just
perfectly-
write down Genesis 1:26 so you know. Go back and read it. Listen, I'm sorry. All right, I'm sorry. It happens. It happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so y'all listen. I'm going to read the verse, and y'all just listen, okay? Genesis 1:26 says this, and it says, "And God said, let us make man in our image, and after our likeness, and let them have dominion or rulership over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." And it says whoa. I jumped a little too far ahead there, didn't I?
LOL.
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 And then in verse 27 it says, so God, hey, listen. Guys, I can't finish if I keep having to interrupt and tell y'all to listen. So God created man in his own image, and in the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. Yes, man and woman, not Z and Zir. Male and female created him. So what does it mean then to be created in the image of God? See, this is a question that I get sometimes. Like, is it saying that like God has a physical body and he made our bodies to look like his body? Like, what is that saying? So first and foremost, you got to understand, in the image of God, it's primarily talking about your soul and your spirit. Right? Because maybe if you're really smart, you said it says, God says, let us make man in our image. You're like, what? I thought there's only one God. But remember, Trinity, 3 in 1. There's the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I talk about how we as humans are also a Trinity. We have a body, we have a soul, and we have a spirit, which is our personality, what makes us unique and special, right? Your soul is what goes on, is your consciousness. It's what exists for all eternity with God. So in the same way, God is a Trinity. Okay, so when God makes man, he is making us to be a representation of him. So when he says, I'm making you in my image, God the Father does not have a physical body because he's God, right? He's not born. But who did have a physical body? Jesus. Who designed our bodies? God did. So clearly, there's meant to be a parallel between us and God in a way. Not that we're God, but that we represent him. So when God makes Adam and Eve, did y'all know he made them naked? Yes.
Yes.
Did y'all know that was his intention, was for humanity to just roam around butt naked and not have a problem? Okay, now in today's world, you're like, dude, that's like, you have like nightmares about that. Have you ever had a dream that you should like somehow ended up in school with just your underwear or something? That's a very specific dream.
So weird.
No, don't lie. Don't lie. Mike, I know you've had it before. Not like you willingly did, like you the dream starts and you're in school and you look down and you're like, you freak out. I don't know where that nightmare comes from, but I've had it like 3 times in my life. And each time, it is a weird nightmare. Hey, but Eric was honest enough to admit it.
I have.
Some of y'all are not honest. Some of y'all are just ashamed to admit it. But listen, here's the point. Guys, listen. Here's the point. God's design is no longer the way that people live. Obviously. If we were living in a way as God intended, we wouldn't even be needing to have this discussion. But we do need to have this discussion. And as a matter of fact, isn't it interesting when you read the story in Genesis that it wasn't until, just Shaylin, that's distracting me. It wasn't until after Adam and Eve sinned that they became ashamed of their bodies. Before they had no problem. So we're going to talk about that at the end. All right, we're almost there, by the way. So don't think like it's like 30 minutes from now, all right? We're going to get there.
You're going so slow, like.
So slow. I'm skipping stuff right now. All right, okay, so listen. Shh. Guys, I can't keep getting you corralled. Please let me lecture you for a second so I can get done faster that way. All right, I promise you. If I want to comment, I'll ask for it. So God creates our bodies in his image to represent him. And this crafting was personal. It actually describes that God actually went into the dirt of the ground and formed our bodies. Everything else he created. Did y'all know he just spoke into existence? Let there be this, and there's that. Let there be light, there's light. Let there be cattle, there's cattle. But when it came to mankind, He got his hands dirty for you. He went and sculpted how humanity would look. It was personal. That's special. So that tells us that our bodies were meant for something higher than to just be seen and treated as a sexual object. Yes? Amen. Right? That's God's purpose and design. Okay, so our number one purpose with our bodies is to be a representation of God. That's number one. That's the first reason God gave us a body, was to be a representation of himself. So, because of this, we live in a world now where the body is treated as a shameful thing. Whether somebody looks at it and says, oh yeah, the body is sexual, let's do whatever we want with it, or the opposite, which is, yeah, the body's sexual, we need to be scared of it. We need to cover up every inch of it, because if I see anything that's not supposed to be, if I even see a show, it's scary, I might sin. That's not normal. That's not God's intention for us to think that way. God wants us to think of each other as being made in the image of God before we think of anything else. So imagine that. Imagine living in a world where as soon as you see somebody, your first response is not, hey, am I personally attracted to them or not? But rather the response is, man, that person, that guy, that girl, that's God's daughter. That's God's son. That's a person who's made in the image of God, and I need to respect that. Imagine if that was where your mind was at. Wouldn't that help you to kind of win the fight against lust in your heart? Amen. If that's how you thought of things, if that's the first thing your brain went to, is realizing, man, my very understanding, the way that I look at people is as a sexual object, I need to have a change in the way that I think. I need to realize that that's not what the body is intended for, exclusively. But rather, that body's meant to be a representation of God. So when I sit there and lust after somebody, when I go and watch pornography, I am degrading the image of God in that person and bringing their body down to be nothing more than my personal pleasure. Now it's a little bit deeper, isn't it? What we're really doing when we engage in lust and the use of pornography. Now it's a little more serious. So the wrong attitude would be, you know what, yeah, the body is sexual, so enjoy fantasizing about it. What's wrong with that? That's the wrong response. The right response as Christians, if we want to win this battle against lust and pornography in our lives, here's the right response we need to have. Man, the body is beautiful because it's made in the image of God, and I want to honor it the way God would. That's a way to summarize it. That's how you need to think. That's how you need to think. If you want to overturn this lie in your life, that's the first step. Because here's the deal, and we're almost done here. We're going to go by pretty quickly now. I've got my main points done.
Is that a rat?
It is a rat. Do y'all know rat poison? Maybe you guys know this, maybe you don't. Rat poison, those little blocks, did y'all know it's 99% completely safe to eat?
Wait, what?
Yeah.
There's a 1% or less is actually poison. So in other words, in order to get the rat to actually want to eat the poison has to literally be so caked in something that is good. Because otherwise, if it was just pure poison, the rat would smell something's off and they would never eat it. So in order to kill the rat, you have to trap it with something that's good. It's gonna soak into my skin. I'm gonna die. No. And by the way, the amount of poison in it is intended to be enough to kill a rat, not necessarily you. That being said, if you do eat a block of rat poison, you will get sick. You probably won't die from one. If you eat like 10 of them, I don't know. Maybe it's a different conversation, right? But point is, hey, do y'all see the point that I'm making? Listen. In order for Satan to entrap somebody in a lie, he has to convince them with things that are true. Guys, when Satan was trying to tell Adam and Eve to sin, the thing that he told them, because what was their response? Hey, just eat of this tree. Eat of this tree. It's no problem. And then Eve's like, wait a second. God said, in the day we eat of that tree, we're going to die. And Satan's like, you won't die. It'll be fine. Come on, you're going to be just like God, actually. You're going to be able to have the knowledge of God. So he has to sell them on a lie by telling them something that sounds really good. Y'all listen, guys, there's a whole lot of heads turning and not looking up this way, and it's driving me crazy because I know it means you aren't paying attention. I'm almost done. I really want to finish. I don't want to have to drag this out over 2 weeks, so please just give me your full undivided attention, all right? So in order for Satan to get Adam and Eve to fall into that sin, he has to convince them with a lie that sounds really good. In the same way our culture tries to sell you guys on the lie, listen, what's wrong? All these Christians telling you need to repress your sexuality. You're a Christian? What? So you believe you need to be a virgin? Why don't you just have fun? Why are you so uptight? Why don't you just do what everybody else is doing? Why can't you just explore? Just have fun. What's wrong with that? Oh, God doesn't want you to have sex. What, are you against sex? This is ridiculous stuff that our culture says. Because why? Because they believe that in order to enjoy my body and sexuality, I can't have any rules. The promise is, by Satan, if you will just let yourself go, you'll have all the fun and pleasure at your fingertips. Don't give yourself any rules. Don't give yourself any restrictions. Just do what you want. Follow your heart. Follow your own desires. But the Christian says, no. That's a false promise. You're promising me all the pleasure that I want, but I know there are consequences. I know the other side of a lifestyle with no sexual boundaries. I know the consequences not only on myself, I know the consequences on my relationships, and I know the consequences for the rest of the world. Not so fast. There's a reason God gave us rules. There's a reason God has boundaries. So we need to understand that the promise of pure and ultimate sexual satisfaction only comes within the confines of marriage, as God designed it. And as a married man, I can tell you, listen, God's design is awesome, but I would not want it any other way. You guys have to believe that for yourselves. Because if you don't believe God's word and his boundaries are good, and you think God's holding out on you, you think God's giving you a bunch of rules just because he wants your life to suck, he doesn't want you to have fun. If you really believe that, then can I tell you, you bought into the lie that Satan sold you. That you can only have fun, you can only enjoy your sexuality over here where it's in the sin area. That you can only do things, you can only have fun when you're doing stuff just like the rest of the world is, just like some of your friends might be doing. You have to decide in your own heart, I'm going to believe God. I'm going to believe in God, the one who made my body, the one who knows it better than I do. I'm going to believe that his rules and guidelines are actually good for me. And I'm going to believe that when he says don't do something, like don't eat the tree, because it's going to have a consequence, I'm going to believe him. When he says don't eat that rat poison, even though it looks so good, I'm going to believe him. Guys, you have to make that decision for yourself. I can't make it for you. You have to believe God at his word. I can't make you, otherwise you end up like a rat drinking poison. Okay, now, very, very quickly, I'm going to give you guys a couple of examples in the Bible and today where the body is used in a non-sexual way. Okay? Maybe you guys will know these, maybe you don't. In the Old Testament, there's an example of Isaiah the prophet. Isaiah the prophet was asked by God to prophesy naked in public. And he was asked to do it as an illustration, right, of that the nation of Israel was going to be stripped naked of all of their wealth because they were going to be put under judgment. So God asked a prophet, a man of God, to preach naked. Now, if being naked was inherently wrong, then God would have been asking this guy to sin. Now, I don't know if Isaiah was attractive or not. I don't know. I mean, he could have been an attractive guy. He could have been ugly and overweight. I have no clue. But if we believe that the human body in and of itself is bad, then God would have never asked Isaiah to do that. So clearly, even in here, all right, there's apparently an example of a guy preaching naked. Now, I would generally say, if you see a guy preaching naked in public, probably out of his mind on drugs, please stay away, all right? Very, very few situations where this would ever be legit, but this did happen, okay? And Peter, y'all know the apostle, disciple Peter, when it was common in their day, because Peter was a fisherman, right? That was his occupation. It was common for fishermen to actually work naked. You know why? Because if they had to jump in the water to correct the nets, if they got caught up, y'all know how hard it is to swim with a bunch of heavy clothes on? And the kind of clothes they wore in that day, they weren't water-wicking swimming trunks. They wore on long robes, cotton and laid. So they couldn't exactly swim in that stuff. So it was common for them to actually just work naked because it was easier. Again, in this context, in that culture, that was not seen as a sexual thing. That was seen as normal for men in that job to work naked. And nobody saw it like, oh, this is pornographic, because nobody looked at it that way. And the last example, actually, this is pretty interesting. In the early church, not today, and I certainly would not say today, but in the early church, it was actually common for people to be baptized naked. Did you know why? Because the idea was, if just like you were born into the world naked, so you're being born again, bringing nothing to God, right, but yourself. Now, I will add a qualification. When this baptism was practiced, it was usually male and female baptisms were done separately. So there was that. There was kind of like a modesty thing, like, hey, we don't want to intermingle, but it was common, actually, in some places to do that. It was viewed as a sign of respect. If I'm going to come and be baptized, I'm not bringing anything to God but myself. Right? I didn't bring anything into this world, and I'm not bringing anything to God when I get saved. That being said, these are examples, again, where the body was treated in a respectful way. Y'all listen. The body is treated in a respectful way. Now, you may think, in today's world, we don't do any of these things. However, there are 3 things in today's world which you might see a naked body in a non-sexual way. One of them is art. If you've ever been to an art museum, I would hope. No, hold on, I got to focus. I would hope that if you've ever been to an art museum with your school and you came across the sculpture aisle, you had enough maturity to just walk through and understand that it's art. Some people, because they so strongly believe the lie that culture has put into their heads, cannot handle seeing a naked sculpture without making sexual jokes. This is another example. Guys, listen. It's funny in a sense, but it's sad because, listen, that's because people have such sexualized brains. That the artist who made this sculpture, intending it to be beautiful and honorable and respectful, has his work degraded 2,000 years later by horny teenagers. You see what I'm saying? That's the lie. That's where the lie comes. That's where it shows its face. That a lot of people can't even handle seeing art without thinking something inappropriate. Guys, that means we have a problem in our culture. We should be able to appreciate art in a non-sexual way like the artist who made it did. Second thing is doctors. Guys, doctors get exposed to nudity all the time in a lot of different ways. And most of the time, there's a lot of blood and other things with it. But again, wouldn't you be absolutely angered if you heard a story that a doctor, when he was working on his patients, was taking photos of them? Wouldn't you be outraged?
Yes.
If that doctor was being perverted? Exactly, right?
You know that there was one doctor who was a sperm donor.
Oh, I heard all that. Hey, but we don't got time for that story. Okay, listen. If we expect doctors to act professionally when dealing with the human body, why don't we expect ourselves to have that response? How come some people have higher standards for doctors than they do for themselves? If you can trust a doctor to see nakedness and not be inappropriate about it, you ought to be able to say, man, shouldn't that be the normal response we should all be trying to have, to not be that sexual all the time? And the last one is morticians. You're like, Ty, what's a mortician? That's a person who prepares dead bodies for preparation. Preparial for the burial. All right, I don't know where I was going there. So again, you would expect these people ought to be professional. Now, can you find examples of doctors, artists, and morticians being perverts? Yes, but you know the rate of that is very small. Because the expectation is if you are perverted, you get fired and you are never allowed in public again, all right? So again, even today, there's examples of where people are expected to treat the body with respect and honor. And all I'm saying is, hey, listen, it shouldn't just be in these areas that the body is treated with respect. It should be all the time. It should be every day for us. It should be every situation. And even if somebody else on social media who has an OnlyFans isn't treating their own body with respect, you as a Christian should have enough integrity to say, listen, even if they don't see themselves as a child of God, I do. Even if they don't treat their bodies as being made in the image of God, I will. Even if they want to treat it sexually, I won't. That's what I'm calling us to as Christians. That's the challenge that we have for ourselves. And the last thing. Wait, hold on. You go ahead and fill this in. Shame leads to blame. I don't have time to go into that, but basically, when Adam and Eve sinned, when God said, hey, what happened here? He went to Adam first, said, Adam, why'd you sin? You know what he said? The woman made me sin. She's the one that gave me the apple. Then he goes to Eve. Eve, why'd you sin? Well, the serpent, he tricked me. You know what it's like? If God was to ask, hey, man, why did you lust after that woman? Well, because she dressed a certain way. Woman, why are you dressing in a sexual way? Because culture does. I just want to dress like everybody else. See, here's the thing. Every person has to take a responsibility for themselves. If you have this shame all the time because you're acting in a way that you know is not good for you, when you get confronted about it, you're gonna push the blame onto somebody else. Everybody wants to blame somebody else for why they treat their own bodies as a sexual object. And listen, God's not accepting any excuses. The shame that you feel over your own sin, over your own objectification, you can't push that off and blame somebody else for it. You got to take responsibility and go, it's my fault. It's me, God. I need to fix this, not somebody else. Here's the quote. If you can't remember anything else from tonight, here's the one thing you need to remember. God is not a pornographer. God is not a pornographer. When He made your bodies, He was not being perverted. He was not saying that, I just want to create this sexual thing for people to mistreat. He was creating a work of art. And if God was not being perverted when He made your body, then we shouldn't be treating like that after the fact. Because what does the Bible say about our bodies? Do they belong to us? No. Who do they belong to? God. Right? The artist who makes a sculpture, it belongs to that artist. You don't have the right to do with it whatever you want. You go to jail. Right? The artist has the ownership over his art. And God has ownership over you. In a good way, not like, abusive way, of course. He's God. He cares about you and loves you. But He's not a pornographer. We need to understand our bodies are not meant to be pornographic objects. And the last verse I have, hopefully this one is correct. It's the verse I'm going to finish on for tonight. Romans chapter, is it right in the notes? Is it right? Romans chapter 12 verses 1 and 2?
It says John. No, I'm just kidding. It's right.
Oh, man. Okay, y'all have me worried. I'm like, dude, I messed up twice? Dang, I'm dumb. Okay, Romans chapter 12, verses 1 through 2. Here's Paul's advice, what we need to do. He says, I beseech you, I'm asking you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies, listen, you present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Your body belongs to God if you are a Christian. You have an obligation to treat it as such. Your body is a temple, and it's not your temple to worship and do what you please with. It's God's temple meant for Him. Okay, second verse. So then, because of this, here's the last verse, and I'm done.
Are you sure?
I am.
You're positive.
I'm positive. Here's the conclusion. Verse 2, y'all listen. And be not conformed to this world. Do not think like them. Do not act like them. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect and the perfect will of God. Guys, as Christians, we live in a world that wants you to believe things that are not true. A world that wants you to think in a perverted way, that does not want you to treat other people as being made in the image of God. The only way out is to have a transformed and renewed mind. Your mind has been poorly wired by culture to think a certain way. You've got to, as a Christian, rewire this brain of yours to stop believing these lies and to believe what God says instead. Because until you rewire this brain up here, you will not behave any differently than you have before. And this is where a lot of Christians get stuck. They're saved, they have the Holy Spirit of God within them, however, they still think like an unsaved person. They still believe like a non-Christian. There's lies that they still believe today, not even realizing those things are lies. And our goal as Christians, if we want to progress, we want to move forward in our walk with God, we've got to find those lies and destroy them. Just like Jesus said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall what? Make you free. We've got to find the truth in the Word of God to find some freedom from these lies that we've been believing. All right. Does all that make sense?
Yes.
I know tonight was a little long-winded, but listen, I hope that you guys learned something. Eric, do you have a question?
I got a question, but I didn't ask this.
Okay.
Boy, not.
Oh, wait. I don't care who asked it. Go ahead.
She said, can you be buried naked?
Can you be buried
You
naked?
said something about,
You-
the way you was born in is the way you're gonna be born again.
I was talking about baptism.
Exactly.
But if you want to be buried naked, I suppose you could be. I don't want to be buried naked.
Put it as a note.
But you can be. I mean, the only problem you're going to run into again is there's a bunch of weird people out there.
I got a question.
You would hope it wouldn't be anybody in your own family, but you never know. Micah, you got a question?
When you're buried and like you're just like skeleton, what are your clothes with?
They just probably degrade over time.
Clothes?
Well, eventually, because even the best caskets eventually are going to rot and degrade. And so the soil, the water, and bugs and all kinds of things are going to get inside of it eventually and probably eat away. It'll just deteriorate over time.
So basically, you're going to be.
That's what it is. So unless you're an Egyptian pharaoh and they like seal your tomb away and like do special things and it still looks like your body's intact after, unless you want that. I mean, I don't know. So, okay, that being said, let me say a word of prayer real quick, and then you can go get food, stay and hang out. If you guys want to try the Oculus, you can do that. All right, bow your heads, close your eyes. Dear God, thank you so much for this day, God. I just want to pray, God, that every person in this room would take to heart what we just talked about tonight, to overturn this devastating lie of thinking of and treating our bodies as sexual objects. God, that is not what you made them for. You made them to be a representation of you and for sex to be an act to be enjoyed within the confines of marriage. God, sex is not an object, it is an intimate act. And I pray that you could help us to make that separation, that our bodies are not objects. God, rather they are temples that belong to a holy God who wants what is best for us. He wants us to be valued and treasured as a priceless jewel, not thrown out to the wolves and thrown out into muddy pits for people to trample all over, God. That is not your design for us. So help us as Christians, God, to believe the truth in your word, that we are made in your image, that our bodies are beautiful objects, our bodies are beautiful works of art, not objects, God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.